My name is Hans-Peter Kleebinder. I'm representing the Executive Program and Network Smart Mobility Management from University of St. Gallen. We are partnering with IAA Mobility and we call this Lunch and Learn. So we give you an impulse about a hot topic and then we would very much like to discuss with you. Yeah, not just about sitting here. So today we have a very hot topic. And I'm really happy and it's very good because we are on the IAA Mobility, which changed from a pure car show to a mobility festival. That means we are not talking about four wheels, but also two wheels, but also rails. So the IAA Mobility is partnering with Zukunft Nahverkehr. It's like the future of public transport and the Deutsche Bahn. And so today we have the privilege to talk about the Deutsche Bahn Navigator. And we brought an expert with me, Lukas. He's going to introduce himself shortly from your background, which I found it very interesting. You are the manager of integrated everyday mobility. So I think it's a big thing, it says a lot. And you give us a short impulse and then we have a chat together with you on stage. Lukas, please.
Well, thank you, HP, for the quick intro. Let me just add a couple of words about myself without now boring you too much about my vita. So, my name is Lukas Foljanty, Senior Product Manager at Deutsche Bahn, the regional train branch, DB Regio, where I lead a project which is about mobility as a service, which is about the DB Navigator. And I would like to today give you sort of a little bit of an impulse on what we are doing, but not really go that much into detail, rather keep this on a level where hopefully afterwards we can have an engaging discussion about what it takes to make mobility as a service a success. Very briefly about myself, I've been with Deutsche Bahn now for roughly 1.5 years. Before that I had different positions at software companies for mobility services, predominantly in the on-demand transport space, but also mobility as a service platforms, and before that used to work as a consultant for public transport agencies and operating companies. So, with that said, very sort of as a rough sort of, let's say, outline and frame to what I'm about to present. So, mobility as a service is on one hand still a super hot topic, on the other hand it's not yet super new, right? I mean, if you discuss mobility as a service, then it's something that, in the industry, in academia, has been around probably 10 to 15 years with lots of different projects, pilots, companies, going into that space, building products, trying, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding. So why do we at Deutsche Bahn care about this? Why do we, as the largest public transport operating company here in Germany, care about mobility as a service? Well, the answer to that is that we firmly believe that we need to integrate different modes of transportation in order to make sure that public transport can be as attractive, as convenient as possible. Because I think the reality is that public transportation is best when it serves, as a different sort of synonymous term, when it is actually mass transit. So a large number of people traveling at the same time, roughly in the same direction, where you can just put as many people as possible into a very large vehicle. This is where we excel. It gets much more challenging when you need to serve lower demand areas, lower demand times of the day. You can still try to, find new ways to do that. For instance, on-demand transportation, where you use algorithms to pool passengers who want to travel in a similar direction into smaller vehicles. But we still have the challenge of the first and last mile, because clearly we will not be able to really serve a door-to-door kind of business model or service model like an Uber or a Lyft might be doing, which means we still need to overcome the challenge that people might just be sort of put off of public transport because they just kind of, don't really bother to walk to the next stop. Which means we believe we need to partner with also other transportation service providers, mobility service providers. However, there's a catch. as I said, mobility as a service is not that new as a concept, and we have seen past attempts of making this a success. And I will not read this quote. It's from a consultancy which did a study a couple of years ago on success factors for mobility as a service. And basically, they said, okay, there has really not been actually any example that has been a lasting success. So why is that? And I want to today just present 3 hypotheses which I have, and then some deductions what this might mean for us as a public transport operating company. So the first is that the concept or the notion that people are multimodal in how they choose their modes of transport is probably not true in most of the cases when they travel. Because how do you travel mostly? Not expecting an answer here now, but just, if you kind of think about it, probably you use the same route every day, probably even the same connection. So your train leaves at 7:43, and gets you there, hopefully in time, to your workplace mostly. It's called commuting. It's, what happens millions and millions of times every day, right, all over the world. So I think the building a business model around a multimodal persona will be very challenging, because the demand for people who really are that spontaneous and say, okay, let's check my app and see, where I need to go and how I get there, is not that big, at least as a routine. When I'm abroad, when I'm traveling, business trip, vacation, then I think it's a different story. But for the everyday use case, it's probably not. Which leads me to the second hypothesis, which is very closely tied together in my mind, which says that customer acquisition, building a user base for mobility service as a platform, as a business, is very hard to do economically viably, because you will need to invest a lot of money into really kind of getting into sort of a flywheel effect, where you really see the uptake in usage, which then would justify also the spend you have on building the product, maintaining the product. That is a challenge, because unless you have that relevant large user base, I'm getting here to my third hypothesis, then being integrated into a mobility service platform is probably not going to be super attractive for the mobility service providers or MSPs here on this slide. Because, what do they get from being integrated into a different platform? Well, first, they lose direct access to the customer. Probably not super keen on that, many of them. Then, customer support might be more complicated, because there's an intermediary in between who might be handling payments or user account management, all these kind of things. And third, then clearly it only really becomes interesting if then you would also attract new users, which the MSPs don't actually already have as customers on their platforms. Which, in my mind, then kind of what follows, or what I deduct from this, is that for mobility as a service, in order to make this work as a business, you will need to build this on top of an existing platform which has a very clear, very strong anchor use case, which kind of makes sure that users actually interact with the product daily, maybe even multiple times a day. And then you can introduce them to other modes of transportation, which makes it much more, let's say, natural to actually start maybe checking out kick scooters, bike sharing, whatnot. And you need to do this on the basis of a very large user base to make this also economically compelling for the partners to join. And then, what are we doing about it? I'm not going to give you specifics on what we are actually doing at the moment on this front, but as food for thought and sort of the maybe start into our discussion, let me just give you sort of an idea of what we already have at Deutsche Bahn. We have the DB Navigator, and I'm assuming that everyone German in this auditorium knows this app, but probably even people from abroad if you've traveled in Germany, because it's just by far the largest mobility platform in Germany. So, I'm not going to read all these KPIs here. I think they stand for themselves, but just maybe let me point out this one. Anchor use case, what I just said earlier, 171 million trip searches every month. And that, I think, is the foundation which just creates this level of user interactions. Because we do that Germany-wide for all kinds of public transport, long-distance trains, regional trains, buses, ferries even, and whatnot, right? And so, food for thought, and opening the discussion here, what if this would become the MaaS platform? Is that going to finally crack the nut? Are we going to make MaaS finally a success if we do that? What do you think? And also maybe what do you feel would need to be sort of product-wise at the heart of this to really become something you would like to be using as well? Thanks for the attention, and then looking forward to the discussion.
So thanks a lot, Lukas. We want the one smart mobility at your fingertip app. We are waiting for it since years. The discussion about why MaaS doesn't work as it was hoped, I think you made it clear. Before I start, I would like to look in the audience and look please at your mobile phone and how many mobility apps do you have now? So I give you 10 seconds, or just you guess. We talk about flying, rail, car, bicycles, so really the whole ecosystem. So who has more than 10? 20? 30? Okay. So I counted 38, but I'm a nerd, so this really is. So you have the connection. You told us the figures, which are, and this was like a pitch, biggest user base, daily use. Who else besides you could do this job to start with?
So I think if we look at what other big platforms are out there, clearly the likes of Google Maps come to mind, okay. Uber maybe comes to mind. So again, I would say apps or platforms which already again have a very clear anchor use case and the user base clearly as well. But I think the anchor use case is, I think, the key point in my mind, because it just creates this continuous recurring interaction with a product. And so I think for us, this is probably what we would look at from a competitive standpoint, but at the same time, when we think about the likes of Uber, then there's also, of course, another thought that comes to mind, which is, hey, actually they might be a super relevant partner for us, because if I'm traveling with lots of luggage and need to get to the train station, then Uber might actually be a good choice there for just making, again, the whole system more attractive, because I think that's ultimately our goal.
We were discussing yesterday with Olga Neska from Telekom and Anna Teresa about the same topic. In the end, we all talk about how can we manage our daily mobility. And one other example was if you already have a relationship on a base, like a billing relationship, that is one thing which could also help.
Yep.
So I come back to the Deutschland ticket, because at that moment you have one relationship,
yep.
and that could help.
Yeah. So absolutely, and if we actually take this chart again and this yellow box there, and everybody who might not be familiar with the Deutschland ticket, it's a Germany-wide flat fare monthly subscription pass, where basically for 58 euros per month you can travel all of regional public transportation and local public transportation, not the long distance trains, but everything else basically Germany-wide, and it's super attractive. At the moment, I think we are roughly at 13.5 million tickets in Germany. And the yellow box here, which I want to mention, is it's actually a very small feature we introduced earlier this year, which just basically allows you to filter the trip searches for connections that are, where you don't need to pay any extra if you already have the Deutschland ticket. And as you can tell, in average, we are having more than 18 million usages of that filter. And I think that, to me, demonstrates that there is a need for a sort of on the back of a Germany-wide ticket, a need for a Germany-wide digital access to the system, which clearly is a lot around information, but also about booking and a seamless experience in total.
So we're on a global fair. If you look at other countries, maybe Europe, which is the one you say we can learn a lot, kind of best practice, and why?
So I think there are great examples. Austria comes to mind with the Wegfinder app or Wegfinder app. I'm not sure how to actually say that. I think SNCF is another example, which is more, I think, in France exactly. It's more maybe. Yeah, I think there's more controversy around how they went about it, but still interesting case study nonetheless, I believe. And then I would say it's also really looking at not only, let's say, your own bubbles, but actually looking at other platforms, how they actually do this as well. And I personally, but this is really now more a personal take, I personally find it quite inspiring to look at apps from Southeast Asia, for instance, the super app approach, where I believe, it's very different from what we do today, but nevertheless, I think it is very interesting from the concept of mobility, not sort of as a standalone activity, but a way to go about your daily business. And that, I think, ties in quite well with our approach to say integrated everyday mobility, but then it's kind of the one step further.
So it's a default, it's the everyday mobility, and you take other services all around it.
Yep.
Any questions, please, from your side? Come on. Any examples, maybe? Any input? Okay, I've enough questions. So you mentioned you worked on on-demand mobility. And for me, we are very close to the hottest booth with Holon. And we have this discussion now in Germany about our mobility transformation, and EV was the big topic, and maybe the next topic could be autonomous. And there was one panel with the CEO of Volkswagen, our Minister of Transport, and the CEO of BVG. So if you look, how is this autonomous technology going to influence your business? Or could it help it? Or
I think so. The short answer is yes. It will impact our business. It will change our business. And at Deutsche Bahn, which is a different branch of Deutsche Bahn, is in charge of that. But nevertheless, we are actually already very active in that space as well. So there's the Kira project in the Frankfurt area, exactly Frankfurt region, where we are. Already also with sort of a public, with the public, you can actually test ride autonomous, on-demand vehicles, which are very much around the concept of having this more as a public transport type of service. So not maybe the sort of ride-hailing approach, where this would be your individual, more taxi-like trip, but really as a pooled service where it's much closer to, what public transport is about, right? To, have more people share a vehicle. And I think here, clearly for us, for first and last mile, but maybe also beyond that, maybe even to some degree really to the point where, especially in lower demand areas, lower density areas, rural areas, where suddenly, the challenges of operating a fixed route scheduled bus service might actually be overcome at some point through, having autonomous vehicles. So yes, it's very relevant for us, and I think it's also something that has the potential to truly change public transportation. But clearly we are also, of course, still in a phase where there's a lot of things happening, where I think we also need to, it's very important that we as a player are part of that game, just because there's, of course, the alternative route, which might also say, okay, robo-taxis at some point might dominate everything.
That was ahead, yes, Deutsche Bahn. If you look specific on your navigator, and the discussion was a lot, who is going to be the operator? Who has the data? Who has the connection? So could this be this step to a super app? Because it's a lot about digitally organizing, getting transport, scale it. How would you integrate it in here, and what could it mean?
So what we are exploring at the moment is, I think, extremely relevant to that question, because it's about how to actually integrate on-demand transportation in general into our platform. Because it's, of course, what you would then later need also in a scenario where autonomous vehicles start becoming available at scale. And on-demand transportation, of course, already exists, and the technology exists. But it's actually
Which
less.
one? Which example?
Well,
the closest. Which is the closest to?
Well, I mean, we at Deutsche Bahn, we have a subsidiary called IOKI, which is one of the technology providers in that space, where of course we also have lots of experience in as an operator of these kind of services as well. And so, but nevertheless, the challenge there is not as trivial as you might think. It's not just plugging in a sort of API and then your trip search engine just takes care of that, because sort of fundamentally, on-demand mobility is of course more flexible, right? That's the design concept behind it. Passengers maybe have more convenience by being picked up closer to where they come from and where they want to go, but the other side then being that they still will need to accept there's more flexibility in when the vehicle will come, how long will the trip take, because it might be a detour. And reflecting that in a trip planning app, where for us it's a lot about the interconnectivity, so transferring from one leg of a trip to the other. Suddenly this becomes much more sort of flexible, or maybe even sort of much harder to plan for, right? And to come up with ways, technology-wise, how to deal with that level, let's say, of uncertainty. I think that's a big, very interesting challenge that we are embarking on solving.
Our former transport minister, Volker Wissing, was once stating the main reason for the Deutschland ticket, which is the flat rate, is to collect data about mobility and how this will change. So you're the treasurer of the biggest treasurer of mobility data if you look at your figures. Can you share maybe some insights, maybe also some things which didn't work, and take us on this journey, because I really think that's most spectacular if you look at those data.
Yeah. So I think just important to emphasize that we are not creating user profiles in that sense that we know where you were traveling as a person. But yes, we of course have lots of insights into the trip searches that are happening on our platform. And I think one interesting fact and figure is that of these 171 million mobile trip searches we see every month, around 65 to 70% are actually in public transport, so local and regional. So it's a lot about actually people looking for what's my option in more or less my surrounding. Of course, long distance trains for us as a business is of course one of our main pillars, but purely from a digital product standpoint and therefore also data standpoint, sort of the more local, more regional mobility is actually what is, what is kind of core to the data we see on the platform. And then clearly, with regards to the Deutschland ticket, this is something where we definitely can see, for instance, changes in mobility behaviors as well. People, for instance, traveling more on the weekends, that's something we definitely can tell. We do also see some level of shift in between regional and long distance trains. And overall, I think that clearly is more than a political question of what's the impact of Deutschland ticket in total on the modal share. I think that's something where I don't actually want to get into that much now, but it's still something where I think we can definitely see that Deutschland ticket has been extremely successful in this in giving people much more freedom and choice in the mobility for different use cases.
I think freedom of choice is a big thing. We are quite dependent as a car nation on our cars. 70% live in rural areas and need their car. So I don't think it's the easiest place to reach this target of seamless as your fingertip. If we look again on the Navigator app, I'm missing, I love to be driven by chauffeurs from Deutsche Bahn. So for me, really, I'm a heavy user. There's one use case I really miss and which would help me a lot. It's international and even night trains. Why can I not book my night jet train from Zurich to Vienna on the Navigator, but on some other platforms from Deutsche Bahn?
So So I think the one thing where I'm also then able now to give you, let's say, some hope there. I think what's changing and what's I think a super important step there is the so-called OSDM standard, which is the open sales and distribution model between European train operating companies, and this is what we are going to implement, and therefore we are getting very close to that. So yes, I absolutely agree. I think that is one part of the integration of European train networks, which of course historically have not been very integrated. Historically, one train operating company ended on the border, and the other one had a completely different standard on the other side of the border, and this takes time to overcome. But with regards to digital ticket sales, we are going to see that happen very soon.
Because to mingle with 3 different apps, it's quite important.
Yeah.
Again, in your round, any questions now? Please, here.
Hello, my name is Clemens. I'm interested, how do you see the future of the DB Navigator app? Do you think there will be, instead of 600 ticket types, will there be more like custom-tailored ticket types, or with the success of the Deutschland ticket, will it get more simplified?
So that's a great question, which I think it's something where I can just give sort of a half-baked answer, to be honest, because ultimately it's a political question, right? The Deutschland ticket, I think, it proves that people are very happy with having just this one type of ticket.
Maybe explain, because we are international, how the system works, because it's quite unique, this federal approach.
So the Deutschland ticket, what we said earlier, right? Germany-wide, flat fare, you pay 58 euros, can travel everywhere. But we have, in Germany, many public transport associations, let's call them, where basically on a regional level we have municipalities and the public transport operating companies sort of join forces to, on one hand, have harmonized timetables. That makes total sense, but then also have their own integrated ticketing and fare structure, which also made a lot of sense regionally for a long time before, of course, the Deutschland ticket, because the Deutschland ticket kind of overcomes that. And so now the question is, do we actually still need those regional tickets, which I think is kind of your point there. And I think the answer is sort of yes-ish. We still need them because there are still plenty of people still buying a single trip ticket, for instance, here in Munich, when I just want to go today from the Messe to the open space, where, as HP said, we with Deutsche Bahn have a very nice and big booth, which I welcome you to see. So I think there is still a need for, let's say, more the occasional type of users. Nevertheless, having 608 ticket types, I think, is not what we probably think is a great, actually user-friendly scenario. We of course try to make it as easy as possible for passengers to get the right ticket, but nevertheless, just maintaining and managing this many different tickets and fares is already something which, from an efficiency standpoint, arguably is something where if you would reduce the number, would help a lot. So,
any more questions? One question: if you have a wish, or let's say, we looked at autonomous, but if talk about really multimodal, which is the one mode which has most potential. You have bicycles, you have cars, you have scooters. Which one of them is best working together with traveling by train?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way I think we look at it is kind of use case specific. And if I think about everyday mobility, I'm mostly thinking about commuting and sort of a very sort of
last mile.
Yeah, first last mile. And there I would say bicycles and kick scooters make most sense. While clearly for the more long distance travel, where I actually plan ahead, maybe where I have my own luggage or want to go with my whole family, then clearly car sharing or also taxi and ride hail would make a lot of sense. So we're kind of looking at this from different angles, from different use cases. Ultimately, I think it would be great to, at some point, get to the point where you can serve all these use cases just from this one place, this one platform.
So great mission. I wish you best luck to fulfill this mission. We need it. One last thing. at the Königsplatz, it's in the center of Munich. There's a Zukunft Nahverkehr stage. They have a great program until Sunday. So if you want a deep diver into all issues around public transport, go there, great place. They even showcase the next generation S-Bahn.
Yes.
So they're really not only software, but hardware to look at and to sit in. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Thank you.